Alright, in this video we're going to learn how to name acids. So when you're naming acids with one element, you have to include the prefix hydro, the root of the anion, then the suffix "-ic", and lastly the word acid. All acids start with a hydrogen, so when you see hydrogen in front of a compound, know that you're going to be using this strategy. So for HF, you have hydrogen and you have fluorine. So first off, write the prefix hydro. So hydro, and then what's the root of fluorine? It's FLOUR, so hydrofluor. And then you have to write the suffix "-ic", so hydrofluoric. Lastly, the word acid, hydrofluoric acid. That's it. For H2S, don't let this 2 change anything. It's just denoting how many hydrogens you need to cancel with the -2 charge on the sulfide. So H2S, the S is sulfur, so it's going to be hydro. The root of sulfur is just sulfur. It's the entire word, sulfur, and then "-ic", then acid. So hydrosulfuric acid. And so this applies with one element. If you're forming acids with polyatomic ions, then you don't use hydro like we did with the single element ones. We just use the root. And if it ends with 8, if the polyatomic ion ends with 8, we replace that with "-ic". And if it starts with per, so for example, pernitrate, then we would add a per as a prefix if the polyatomic ion started with a per. And if we had a polyatomic ion ending with "ite", we would use the root and then OUS, us, and then the word acid. And if it started with hypo, then we would add the prefix hypo here. So for example, HNO3. NO3 is nitrate. So you would add the root of that, which is nitr, and then "-ic", acid. So it'll be nitric acid. We won't add a hydro or anything like that. The hydro is only for one element. So it'll be nitric acid. And then if we have pernitrate, now that we have a per, we're going to basically add that as a prefix. So pernitric acid. Okay. So 8 goes with "-ic", and sometimes you add per if there's a per in the polyatomic ion. Okay. So for chlorite, we're going to have the root of chlorite, so ClOR, and then OUS, so chlorous acid. That's the name, chlorous acid. For hypochlorite, one less oxygen, you would add this prefix hypo in front of the chlorous acid. So hypochlorous acid. That's it. So just remember, "ite" goes with OUS, and if you have the polyatomic ion naturally starting with a hypo, then you would just place that hypo there. Okay? So now we can practice. You can pause the video right now and try these on your own, and then I will do them. Okay, hopefully you've tried these problems on your own. HCl is with one element, and the rule for naming one element, you use hydro, then the root, and then "-ic", acid. So hydro, root of chlorine is chlor, and then "-ic", acid. So hydro, "-ic", acid. Okay. Now for H2C2O4. Don't let this 2 throw you off again. It just denotes that there's 2 hydrogens in order to cancel out with the 2 minus charge of C2O4. C2O4 is oxalate. And remember that 8 goes with ick. 8 goes with ick. This is something you're going to have to memorize. 8 goes with ick. So it's going to be oxalic acid. Remember, there's no prefix here because it's just oxalate. If it was, for example, peroxalate, then we would do peroxalic acid, but it's not, so we won't have a prefix. H2SO4. SO4 is sulfate. Sulfate goes with ick. Don't let this 2 throw you off. It just denotes that there's 2 hydrogens to cancel with the 2- charge of SO4. So we're going to use the root. So sulfuric. Sulfur, use the entire word. So sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid. Okay? And the way I like to memorize that 8 goes with ick and not us is that I like to think that the ite is never going to go with the I in ite is never going to go with the I in ick. I just like to think that the 2 I's kind of repel each other, so they're not going to go together, meaning that the 8 will have to go with the I in ick, and the I will have to go with the O in OUS. Alright, I hope this was helpful, and please subscribe and like.